guys, I got my smoothie, got my notes, got everything ready and ready to go. We have a microphone update, you guys. I just need to quickly clarify this. I know it's usually skincare with Saibs, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult doing my skincare while I tell you like a very important story. So things are gonna change a little bit. Picked up this book on my way to holiday and it's called A Short History of the World in 50 Lies. It's very intriguing, isn't it? You guys will not believe the things I learned. It turns out that history can be filled with so many lies. Outrageous lies, dare I say. I guess historians were like, let's just write whatever is convenient for the narrative. And on this series, which I'm going to be unpacking every Thursday, I will tell you about these lies. You guys, it's very juicy. This is the history version of Gossip Girls. Alright, let's start. Lie number 1. The power, betrayal, and darkness of China's only female emperor, the infamous Wu Zhitan. Just keep in mind that all these are completely foreign names to me, so if I mispronounce it, please be kind and nice and I will get better. She knew this day would come. Every ruler knows that one day, no matter how tightly you cling to power, they will have to let it go. As she laid in her bed, feeling the weight of her 81 years old body, she wasn't afraid of death. She has faced bigger enemies in life, but she couldn't help thinking about what did she leave behind? Not her riches or her palace. That was nothing to her. She thought about her legacy. How would they remember me, she said, and how the stories of my life would be told. She once thought that her accomplishments would be enough to earn her a place in history. After all, she unified an empire, expanded its borders, and promoted capable men based on their talents in a time where family names were all that matters. She ruled an entire dynasty as a woman in a world that was never meant for her. She thought that was enough, that people would see her as she saw herself, a leader, a reformer, someone who reshaped history with her bare hands. But little did she know. The stories that were told about her weren't the ones she hoped for. They aren't remembering her achievements, her reforms, or how she brought stability to an empire. No. The stories they told are dark, twisted tales of blood and betrayal. Before she died, she chose to leave her epitaph blank. She said that she only wanted to be judged by history, but this may not have been a good idea. History did not remember her as an effective leader, but a callous murderer, who would later be described as the woman who killed her sisters, slaughtered her brothers, murdered her emperor, and poisoned her mother. Both gods and humans hate her. Remember this quote because we're going to come back to it later. This was Wu Zhitan. She is China's only female empress, a woman who fought tooth and nail for a power in a world dominated by men, and a system where royalty was only reserved by blood. But before we unpack all these lies and understand how she became the most hated empress, we first need to know who she was and what led to her being depicted as the most evil and bloodthirsty figure in Chinese history. Let's rewind a little bit. Wu Zhitan, which I will be referring to her as Wu from now on, she did not start as a powerful empress. In fact, she was born to a family that wasn't exactly nobility, but not peasants either. They were somewhere in between. Comfortable, but not rolling in imperial luxury. Her father was a minor official. Wu was raised in a home where education wasn't reserved just for boys. She learned to read and write, which, let's be honest, that wasn't exactly common for girls back then. So she was smart, and most importantly, she knew she was smart. Wu wasn't the type to sit around and wait for things to happen to her. She had ambition, and that ambition led her to the imperial palace at 14. She entered the palace as Taizong's, the emperor at the time, concubines. Let me tell you what a concubine is. It's basically a woman who lives with a man, in this case the emperor, and have recognized relationships with him. Even sometimes having children with them, but they held a lower status than a wife. They were like primarily for serving and companionship, and in many cases, just, increase heirs to the throne, basically creating all the plus ones in case the main wife cannot have kids or in case any of the main kids die. Brutal, isn't it? Concubines in imperial China wore different clothing based on their rank and their position, because even the concubines were ranked, and there was like defined hierarchy. I hate this word. There was defined hierarchy between the wives and the concubine. Let me break this down for you. You have the primary wife, or like the first wife. She's often referred to as the main wife or the legal wife. She held the highest status in the household and she had authority over the concubines. She also had legal recognized status. And then you have concubines. You can have as many concubines as you want as long as you can afford to. They held a lower status compared to the primary wife, but most importantly, among the concubines, you also have hierarchy there. You have the highest ranking one, which was often the favorite, the closest to his heart. They had privileges and better conditions, better clothing, elaborate and like luxurious attire. They had better living conditions. It was almost like a competition. The favorite concubines get the best, and the lowest get the worst. I think that in itself tells you a lot about the gender roles or the gender hierarchy at the time between men and women themselves. Because if the women are being ranked and the man is at the top of that, it just says everything. It says everything. At this point, Wu wasn't dressed in nice clothes, luxurious clothes, because she was far from being the favorite concubine. But still, she wore soft, modest silks, maybe pale pink or blues. By the way, fun fact, deep colors were reserved for royals or higher up people, or like more like nobles or rich, because getting the dye at the time was very expensive. So the only people who could afford these deep colors are people with deep pockets. And she wasn't, so... This is so funny because nowadays pastel colors and like beige and colors that are not on the nose are considered classier, which just makes me feel like everything in context just makes sense because it's just what everyone believes, right? But I digress. As we know now, Wu wasn't the one to blend in the background, you know? She observed everything. She learned the ins and outs of the palace politics. She sharpened her mind. When the other concubines focused on winning the emperor's fleeting attention, she had bigger plans. She didn't need to be the emperor's favorite, at least not right now. Which I think is very smart because he was old. She was playing the very long game. Alright, let's just quickly now talk about how did she become the empress, because you can't go from being a concubine to an empress. That just feels like a very big leap. But it's gonna make sense, trust me. When Emperor Taizong died in 649 AD, aka 11 years after she entered the palace as a concubine, she was 25 at this point, and the palace traditions for concubines whose emperor died was to retire to a Buddhist convent. Basically, they were supposed to shave their heads and like wear plain robes and spend the rest of their lives like praying and mourning. And that was what Wu did for some time, but she wasn't ready yet to trade the soft silk ropes for the boring clothes yet. I mean, I wasn't when I was 25. That was when life was starting. Do you mean as my frontal lobe is finishing, I'm supposed to just go over there and sit in like a covenant for the rest of my life? Yeah, no. But did she do that though? Enter Gaozong, Emperor Gaozong. He's Taizong's son and successor. No, basically Gaozong was the youngest of Taizong's and was not expected to be the emperor, but a few things like happened here and there with his siblings. His dad thought that both of his other siblings are not competent enough for them to be emperors, so he promoted his youngest son as the emperor instead. So Gaozong was not ready for this role, you guys. He was not prepared, he was not educated, he was ready-ish. He knew that there is a possibility, but he wasn't fully ready. It's believed that before his father died, Gaozong and Wu noticed each other and like they sparked an initial connection. I mean, that in itself sounds a little bit weird because she's his dad's concubine. What do you mean you liked your dad's concubine? Some of the resources said that nothing happened when she was his father's concubine, but others say something did, so... yeah, we're gonna take that part with a pinch of salt. But anyway, the story now goes Gaozong, the now emperor, visited the convent during a religious ceremony and crossed paths with Wu again. She wasn't gonna cave to be some forgotten concubine. She was confident, she was striking, and she knew exactly what to do to reignite this old spark. It's not well documented what she did, but perhaps it was like a well-timed glance, a clever comment, or simply just, you know, her presence. But regardless, she managed to rekindle the connection, and Gaozong was hooked, and he brought her back to the palace, not just as his normal concubine, or like a low-ranking concubine, but as his favorite. When she came back to the palace, she wasn't like the other women in the palace, where they were like shy and like tried to blend in and get his attention. She used her wit and like deep understanding of the court politics to offer this new emperor advice and companionship that like went beyond the superficial attraction. Her ability to speak her mind made her stand out in a world where women were supposed to like fit in. Yeah, that made her stick like a sore thumb. Is that the saying? Stick out like a sore thumb. You know, funnily enough, Empress Wang, his wife, and like the number one in the hierarchy of women, really favored her, and she tried to push her to the emperor more because she was trying to distract him from this other concubine that she was worried about. So little did she know. But anyway, with Wu, it started very subtle. She would offer him small pieces of advice, like here and there, on the matter of like state and politics during like very quiet and intimate moments when they were alone. She knew how to time her suggestions and stroke his ego at the same time so he doesn't feel defensive. It was said that she presented all her ideas in like a supportive manner, in like a I just want to see you succeed manner, and that was not threatening for him, and he just welcomed it. She presented a lot of good ideas, and that didn't go unnoticed around the palace because Gaozong wasn't really known for being particularly strong-willed person, so he found her insights very valuable. He would go to his court and be like, I think we should do this, and everyone is gonna be like, oh my god, that's a great idea, and he will be like, yeah. That's my impression of him. He probably did not do that. But he probably felt good that he could come up with good decisions and would hide the fact that it wasn't his ideas when everyone actually knew it wasn't his ideas. Everyone knew it was Wu's ideas. One of the stories that stood out to me was when she advised him to reorganize the court, basically removing the officials who were loyal to his political rivals and promoting those who could be trusted and support his role. This was not a small move. And by doing this, she secured his grip on power. And she also made sure to choose the people who were loyal to him and her as well. Very, very smart, isn't it? But the most famous story of Wu's influence happened during a particularly tense moment in his reign. Gaozong suffered from debilitating headaches, and during one of these episodes, a group of ministers tried to take advantage of his weakness by forcing him to make decisions that would strip him from his power. Wu was like, whoa, 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 whoa. She managed the court while he was resting. She stepped in, took over, and made strong decisions in his absence. She made sure that nothing went against him. She was basically thinking more of him than her because she knew he was going to come back, so she's like wanted to impress him. And at this point, his interests were her interest. But by the time he recovered, she had not only preserved his power, but expanded it. And that made her indispensable in his eyes. Over time, she became his confidant, his advisor, and eventually the person he trusted to steer the ship when he was away. So this situation was not about romance anymore. This solidified her position as his favorite and started shaking some boots because now she was going for the empress role. But she knew that her ascent to being empress is not going to be like a fairy tale. It's not going to be like drinking water. I don't know if that makes sense. It's a saying where I'm from. Basically, you say something as easy as drinking water because drinking water is easy. But I don't know the English equivalent, so do with that as you may. Anyway, so she found alternative ways. Cue line number 1. One of the most infamous and perhaps chilling tales associated with her rise to power was the fact that Wu allegedly, I have to say this, allegedly strangled her own infant to frame Empress Wang, which eventually led to the Empress' downfall and Wu's rise to replace her. But this was a mix of fact, rumor, and political propaganda. Emperor Gaozong's main wife, Empress Wang, was Wu's biggest rival. Correct, yes. Despite her official title, Wang struggled to produce an heir, which it's such a terrible thing because you can never choose that. But producing an heir was something that was crucial for any empress to secure her place in the palace. But Wu, on the other hand, at this point had given birth to many kids, which gave her an advantage over Wang. However, she's still a concubine. No matter what she does, she will always be ranked below the empress. She will never have the same legal rights as the empress. She basically was on shaky grounds because at any point that Wang would give birth to a baby, she would be out. The lie basically says that she killed the child and framed Empress Wang for murdering the child out of jealousy, claiming that the empress could not bear the thought of her having kids, potential heir to the throne. Gaozong was already deeply enamored with Wu and believed her. The scandal rocked the palace. She was immediately deposed from the palace and was put on house arrest. And Wu was elevated to be an empress, taking her place. Ha 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 ha, right? Everyone was like, is so ruthless. We don't know if we're impressed or terrified by this woman. This is a horrifying story, right? But here's the thing. There's literally little concrete evidence that this is actually what happened. It's believed that the story was exaggerated or even fabricated by historians that came after her because, again, it just did not fit with their narrative of a woman being higher up there. She was a woman who had risen to power in like a male-dominated world, and such stories were convenient to discredit her. All right, now let's be realistic. Did Wu win any Mother of the Year award? Absolutely not. She did not. But did she kill her own baby? No, she didn't do that either. But did she use the mysterious death of her own baby to frame her biggest opponent and secure her place in the palace? Yes, she did. She most likely did, actually, yeah. Which, yeah, you can judge it all you want, but she took lemons and turned them into lemonade. I probably would never do this, but I cannot blame her. She is very smart for it. She already lost her child. She might as well just lose the empress and become the new empress. By the time Wu officially became empress, she wasn't just playing the game anymore. She wasn't being subtle about it anymore. She was very overt in ruling alongside the emperor. As time went, his health deteriorated. It was said that she gradually took control, gradually stepped in to fill in his shoes, making big decisions while he took like a back seat. And he was grateful for it because he just could rest and focus on his health. When he died in 683 AD, Wu didn't step down like any good widow empress, because traditionally widowed empresses were supposed to retire to a quiet life, and often in that Buddhist covenant again, or a palace designed for the emperor. So she was expected to live out her days in mourning, dedicating herself to religious devotions and honoring her late husband's memory. But Wu was like, "Wu, oh, retire? Excuse me, sir, are you talking to me? I am just starting." She took full control, declared herself as the new emperor of China. Not just the wife of an emperor, but as an emperor herself. This was an unprecedented move. And this was another move that solidified her as a controversial figure in Chinese history. So she ditched the soft pink and blues of her youth and she stepped into her royal blues and reds. Her robes were like embedded with symbols of power and dragons and phoenix, and her hair was like elaborated hairstyles filled with jeweled pins of like gold and golden crowns that would make any royal envious. I bet she looked at Wang and was like, "You wish that was you, huh? You wish." But yeah, that's my interest in finding fashion. I just went on this like rabbit hole of understanding what she wore and why she wore it. But she knew that it wasn't just about clothing. It wasn't just about what she was wearing. She knew that she needed to come in and assert her power. So that's when lie number 2 came. The lie was that she killed her eldest son, the crown prince, who was rightfully to be the emperor after his father, just to make sure that he wouldn't challenge her for the throne. But we also have to question how much of this is actually true. Many of these stories came from sources that were written long after she died, often by the Confucianism scholars. That one was intermediate and beginner level. But yeah, they weren't exactly her biggest fan. Confucianism is basically an ethical system that places heavy emphasis on traditional gender roles and hierarchy. And a woman ruling an empire, that was about as untraditional as it goes. Those scholars had every reason to discredit her, and they did not hold back. There are multiple accounts from Wu's lifetime that states that her son had a chronic illness since childhood, most likely tuberculosis. And that was the cause of his death, not the fact that she murdered him because she was worried that he's going to take the throne. If she can make a grown man listen to what she wants him to say, and he was an emperor, she can make her child listen to what she has to say as his mother. So yeah, this was a mere rumor documented as a fact. And you can't really base history on those. But was she in general a terrible person as they depict her to be? No, she was in fact a very effective leader. She expanded China's borders at the time, and one of her most remarkable improvements was promoting talented officials regardless of their background. This was not common at the time. Don't get me wrong, she also wasn't afraid to get her hands a little bit dirty. She created a secret police force to root out anyone who opposes her. So anyone who threatened her authority, whether they were ministers or distant relatives, they met a brutal end. So yeah, her reign was a mix of progress and paranoia. She brought stability and prosperity to China, but she also ruled with an iron fist. And with every move she made, her image became more and more intertwined with divine power. She often depicted herself as a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva. You guys, this is gonna challenge my tongue. Rolling my R's is no longer enough. I need to access new parts of my mouth. She often depicted herself as a bodhisattva, aka a ruler who was not chosen by men but by the heavens themselves. However, no matter how successful her reign was, the lies and the rumors that surrounded her as a bloodthirsty ruler who killed her baby, her son, and her husband, and whoever opposed her, nieces and nephews included, never fully disappeared or were never corrected. Alright, now that we know who she was and how she gained power, let's talk about these lies. We already mentioned the tale about her killing her own baby and how that was a sour situation turned more sour, and how her son was just sick and happened to die. She didn't kill him. Lie number 3 was that Wu killed her husband Gaozong. This is another rumor that history depicted as fact, because Emperor Gaozong, as we just mentioned, had a stroke in 660, which led to him being ill for the remaining of his days and eventually died. So it wasn't like the guy was healthy and running and suddenly he got poisoned and died. It's just a rumor because she was painted as a ruthless person, and historians were eating that up as a fact. Lie number 4 was the claim that Wu tortured her enemies and distant relatives who posed a threat to her throne. There is no doubt that Wu was ruthless in her claim to power, but no more ruthless than many of the male rulers who came before and after her. The Tang dynasty was a brutal time, and maintaining power wasn't for the faint of heart. I couldn't do it, yeah, for sure, but I wouldn't be an emperor either. Male emperors executed their rivals and wiped out entire families to secure their thrones. But their actions weren't as scrutinized the way Wu's actions were. You know why? Because she was a woman. Every move she made was seen as a more vicious and more unnatural and more dangerous move. Despite her reign arguably being one of the Tang dynasty's greatest emperors, holding into power for over 4 decades, her achievements remain rarely remembered. By the early 700s, Wu was in her 80s. She was no longer sharp and cunning as she was. Ministers and members of her family started plotting behind her back, including her sons. Unfortunately, they saw an opportunity to reclaim power and restore the Tang dynasty, replacing her own Zhou dynasty, which basically when she came to power, she created her own dynasty because she wasn't a Tang. Her husband was. In 705, a coup was staged, led by her own ministers and even her sons. The coup was swift and calculated. Wu was forced to abdicate the throne and was moved to a quiet exile in a palace where she would live out the rest of her days. She unfortunately died later that year at age 81. Her achievements meant that she could not just be thrown to the corners of history, so instead it was easier to cherry pick the rumors and accounts of who opposed her and document them as fact. The quote, "both gods and humans hate her," is to this day the most used quote about her. Wu's story is the perfect example of history taking the easy route instead of diving into the intricacies and complexities of her personality as a mother and a ruler. Her story was simplified to depict her as a bloodthirsty villain and a cold-blooded murderer. What do you guys think? Do you guys think that she was evil and deserves to be hated, or do you think that history could have been kinder to her? When I first read this story in this book, I felt like I just needed to know more and why these things were lies. And the more I researched about her as a person in China during her time, the more I come to realize that this is just a very classic way of being gender biased, being biased to the fact that women cannot be effective rulers unless they are more than like way unnatural and way ruthless. And it's just very unfortunate that she is the only female empress of China, and she was depicted as such a terrible person. A very terrible person somewhere is looking at her and saying, see, that's exactly why women shouldn't be in power. But yeah, keen to know what you guys think, and I will see you next week, next Thursday. Bye.